Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time, and I'm here for another craft time chat, and this time I'm working on a crochet project. It's not very often you catch me doing videos where I'm doing a crochet project, but I'm going to show you what it is here in a minute. But today I wanted to talk about how I got here. So basically kind of the story of my life, even though I know it's probably sounds really boring, and it's not that I'm so full of myself that I think that everybody just wants my whole life story. But when you're talking about the kind of lifestyle that we live, it is normal for us to be curious about, well, how did somebody get from here to there? How did they make the choices that got them to the position they're in? Before I get into the topic, for those of you who are curious, this is an Afghan. It's actually, even though the colors may not look like it will be, it's actually a baby Afghan. Because yes, I'm going to be a grandma finally, and our kids have decided to wait until the baby's born, and so my daughter-in-law has chosen some very neutral colors for the baby's room. And anyway, and if you saw that rag quilt video, you'll see that there's a similar color combination in that. Then I decided I wanted to make an Afghan too, because since I can't make any cute little outfits until after it's born, because I won't know, I have so many great ideas for little baby girl outfits and baby boy outfits, but I can't really do them until I know what the baby's going to be. So anyway, so Afghan it is, because no matter what color it is, you know how it is, ladies. When you have babies, as many blankets as you can get, the better. So starting from where I grew up, I've always lived in Washington State all of my life, but where I grew up was very different than where I'm living now. The place I grew up was in the middle of Washington State, where it's very, very dry. We have hot, dry summers there. We have cold, very snowy, 3-month-long winters. We have beautiful spring times and beautiful fall. Everything is exactly how you would think it should be for true 4 seasons. Here we have 2 seasons. We have rain and we have sun. We can have days that are just surprisingly warm in fall and in spring, and days that are surprisingly cold in the summer. And 9 months out of the year is typically where we get most of our rain, and we get 120 to 160 inches of rain annually. Where I grew up, it was 10 inches. So big difference. But anyway, when I was a young girl, I was always interested in a more old-fashioned, I wouldn't have thought of it as a self-sustainable lifestyle, at least in that term. My parents had friends that had a farm, and they were really close friends. And a couple times I got to go stay the night out there, and I loved it so much because they had all kinds of farm animals, and they had a beautiful garden, and they had a pond, and they had everything. And I just dreamed that someday that would be my life. And like any young person, that wasn't the life I grew up in, so I didn't know much about it. And my mom, though she was a good cook, she was the kind of person to do a lot of things from cans and boxes rather than cooking breads from scratch and making chili from scratch or anything like that. I actually baked my first thing at 9 years old all by myself. In fact, Mom wasn't home, she was at work, and I decided I really wanted some cornbread. And so I pulled down the box of cornmeal and read the directions and followed them and made my first batch of from scratch cornbread, and it was delicious. Of course, you know how it is. It always tastes better when you do it yourself, but I was so proud of myself that I could bake a loaf of cornbread at the age of 9 years old all by myself. And that kind of kindled a fire in me that made me want to learn how to do all kinds of things, like especially making pie crust. So pie crusts and biscuits were 2 of my next ventures that I got into and learned how to make from scratch. And then by the age of 15, I was making loaf breads, yeast breads from scratch. And I loved it. I loved being able to do that stuff myself. So from that point on, as long as I was still living at home, my job was to make pies and bread. So it just kind of blossomed out from there. Now, I've been a dancer most of my life. I started taking ballet and tap actually at the age of 5 years old. And then off and on through the years, I was in ballet mostly. And I actually started teaching out of our basement to young kids at the age of 16. And because people had asked me to start, people in our church really wanted me to start doing my own classes there. And so that's what we did. And so I started off with some small classes. And after I graduated high school, I stuck around my hometown for another year to just work, help mom with the foster care. And then, I worked down the road at a retirement home. So I did that for most of the next year, just to save a little money and just be a little independent, at least a little bit independent, and kind of think about what I really wanted to do with my future. I mean, my desire was always to be a stay-at-home mom and housewife, but I also kind of fell into the mainstream way of thinking that, to a degree, that, well, you should go to college and you should get some kind of degree and you should get have a career. And I wasn't really sure what that was going to be. I had so many ideas, so many desires, I didn't know. By this point, I kind of figured, being a farmer's wife was something that may never happen. And I figured I better do the right thing and focus on a career. And so one of the things I did really want to do was become a counselor, because I really like to help people. Because even in my late teens, I would often counsel younger teenagers that were struggling with different things with their parents and stuff. And even though I wasn't that much older than them, I at least had a little bit of experience and was getting to that age that I could help them through some of the issues. And that gave me a real strong desire to want to help people. The next spring, after I graduated high school, I did end up going to college. So I moved over to the Seattle area. And because I started late in the school year, I wasn't able to start off with psychology and sociology 101 like I wanted to do. But I really wanted to just jump into the psychology classes. And the class that was available to me was called Personality Theories, which was actually a senior level class. But I went ahead and took it. And the first day of class, the professors telling us about how this is not an easy class. It can be very, very dry. And I was like, oh, great. And yes, there was a lot of it that was pretty dry and so hard to follow sometimes, just because it was so dry. But there were parts of it that were super interesting, and I'm really glad I took that class. But my plan was to finish college, but what happened after my second year, since I started late in that first year, so my second actually full year of college, I was a freshman, part of the year going on to being a sophomore. And by the end of that school year, I decided that I really needed to take a year off so I could save money, pay down my college bill some, and just kind of give myself a mental break, and also to continue to decide what I wanted to do with my life. And at the time I was working at a daycare that was just right across the street from the college, so that made it easy. A couple of friends, other ladies that were taking a break from college at that time, so the three of us got together and we got an apartment, a 3-bedroom apartment. That worked out pretty good. I was there for, I don't think 2 years. I was there for at least a year. We lived in that apartment, and that was kind of nice. It was nice to be completely independent in that way and still working. But and again, I had totally planned on going back to college and getting that degree. I really wanted that degree in psychology, even if I never got into any kind of professional field. I just thought it would be very helpful for my future. But life kind of throws you different weird twists and turns. I was in a pretty serious relationship at the time, but it was also a very emotionally abusive relationship, the guy I was with. And that's, of course, the only reason why I stayed with him so long, because men that are that way, that are emotionally abusive, make you believe that that's the best you're going to get because nobody else will love you. And yep, that was the kind of relationship I was in. But I do have a naturally independent nature to me. And that following summer, I'd finally had it. I was tired of constantly being beat down, not physically, but emotionally and mentally, and made to feel like, that I was worth nothing and that nobody else would love me. And I started to realize, I think this guy is full of it. And I started to stand up for myself. And right around that time, and this is what helped bring the end of the relationship, was I decided I didn't want to stay working in the daycare. I was going nowhere working in that daycare. I loved working with them children, but I was getting paid $5 an hour with no way to advance, and a job came open. This is where it gets crazy, people, and this is why this may seem unimportant, but I need to share it. So I saw in the newspaper as I was job hunting just to see what else was out there, an ad for a cruise ship, a Christian cruise ship that they were hiring people to work on. I said, well, that sounds really interesting. So I gave them a call, and they decided they wanted to interview me. And they really liked the experience that I had. They liked the fact that I was a musician, that I played guitar, that I sang, and that I had experience in teaching and various things like that. And they thought I was the perfect candidate for the job, and so they hired me. Remember, this is a cruise ship. This means they already had trips booked up to the San Juan Islands and some other places. And the problem was they were still in the process of building the ship or rebuilding it. They were remodeling an old oil something or other. I don't remember exactly what it was now. And it was docked there in Seattle. And we even took a day, a lot of us took a day and went out on that ship one day so they could take some photos that were going into the brochures. And so the guy I was dating at the time, of course, he didn't like the idea that I was going to be gone for months at a time. And I actually thought it was going to be the perfect thing, because I figured getting away from him physically would help me clear my mind and be able to figure out, is this where I'm supposed to be? Is this a person I'm supposed to be with for the rest of my life? And is there something better? I mean, really, I felt that was important for me, and he didn't like it. So that was part of the other reason why our relationship ended. Thankfully. There was a couple other things that happened, such as he was supposed to come help my mom and I move my stuff out of my apartment, and she was going to take most of my furniture, because obviously I wasn't going to have room for my furniture on the cruise ship, and she was going to take it back here to where I'm living now, because she was living here at the time. She married a man from this area, and then so she moved out here. And then the plan was, I put in my 2 weeks at my job, and I was moving out of the apartment, and the plan was to stay with my mom for just like 2 weeks, and then I was going to go back to Seattle and move on to the ship. Well, he was supposed to show up and help us move, and he never showed up. In fact, some neighbor guys saw my mom and I struggling with some heavy stuff and came and helped us, and they knew I had a boyfriend, and they just couldn't believe he would just leave me stranded like that. And that was it. I'd had it by that point, and so had my mom. And she pretty much told him so when he finally showed up after it was all done. So anyway, that's really kind of a moot point, but that was a big part of my life, and what I went through in that relationship, it took me a long time. It took me years to heal. So anyway, I came out here to where we're living now in the Pacific Northwest, right? Not far from the whole rainforest. Shortly after coming out here and staying with my mom with full plans of moving onto that cruise ship in a couple weeks, I get a call from one of the ladies that I had worked with, which was a super nice lady, that told me that she goes, this thing is bad news, and she says, get out while you can. And I'm like, really? And I didn't want to believe it, because I was so excited about this job. And then not long after that, I get another call, like in a couple of days, to find out that even though these people that had bought this ship and were remodeling it and had hired all of us people from different states, so like 2 or 3 guys from Colorado that flew out, that quit their jobs and flew out to Seattle and to help work on the ship to get it ready. Come to find out, they didn't have enough funds because they squandered a lot of their money, and they couldn't finish building the ship. And they had to cancel all the trips, and several of us were left jobless as a result. So here I was in this little tiny podunk town and not knowing what to do with myself. And I actually had full intentions of going back to the city, staying with friends, and going job hunting. In fact, I had a weekend all planned out where I was going to go stay with some friends of mine and then spend that time. Actually, I was going to go over like on a Thursday, so I'd have Thursday and Friday to do some job hunting and then come home on the weekend was the plan. Well, that Wednesday night, before the day I was supposed to leave to go stay with my friends, Patrick, whom I'd only just met the Sunday before at church, I was at church that Wednesday night, he comes up to me and asks me out. He wanted me to go out with him the very next day. And I was a little surprised because I'd only just met him. My mom had been begging me to stay. She just felt just in her soul that it wasn't right for me to go back to the city. And I figured mom was just being overprotective mom. And then another funny thing was another friend of mine, the friend that I made here, had asked me to go into PA with her to just go have lunch, maybe see a movie, do some shopping or whatever. And initially I said, well, I don't think so. I'm planning on going to Seattle tomorrow to do some job hunting. And then later Patrick comes up and asks me out, and then I'm like, let me think about it. Because I started kind of feeling that maybe all of these were signs. Some of you who aren't Christians might find it kind of crazy, but I sort of took that as signs, as maybe the Lord was telling me I needed to stay. So later that night, I felt certain that was the right choice. And so, at least for now, I figured I can always go back. I can always reschedule and go job hunting over there another time. And so I called up my friend and said, I'm not going to be able to make it. I might have to reschedule. And so I went to town with my friend the next day and went out on a date with Patrick the next night, and we really hit it off. And I ended up staying. So I started doing some job hunting around this small town, which is really difficult because they're a very tight-knit community. And they're not really quick at hiring people they don't know. But then a job came open for an aerobics instructor at our local gym. Well, I had actually done a little bit of aerobics teaching as well as dance. So I applied for the job and I got it. And I started off there. But in the meantime, Patrick, who we're still dating at the time, had talked me into starting, knowing that I was a dancer, had talked me into starting up some ballet classes there at the gym. And so I did, and was surprised at the results I got in such a small town. Because at the time that I moved here, the population was about 2,000. And I actually started right off the bat. In the first month of class, I had 20 students, and it grew from there. And then Patrick and I, his dad was selling this house. And the housing market was just doing terrible. And he even knocked off another $10,000 off this house just to sell it to us when he found out, once we got engaged, because that was about that same time. And it had this rec room over here that was half the size it is now. And I figured that would be a perfect place for me to move my dance classes to, so I didn't have to keep paying rent at the gym. And so we got married, and that's what we did. I started teaching my classes here, and then they kept growing until I had just here. I was teaching in the next small town over as well. Once a week I was driving over there. So at one point I had about 100 students all together, and 3/4 of them were just here in our small town. So I was doing it all right here. And then we decided to build on. So that's how we ended up with such a big room in there, as we decided to add on, because I needed more space with more students and bigger teenagers too. That little room, what they could do one jump and they'd be across the room, so they needed something where they could do several jumps across the room. That was around 95, 96, I think it was, that we redid the dance room. And then shortly after that, we found someone local that was wanting to start teaching some Taekwondo classes. And so we worked out a deal with him, and he started teaching classes out of our studio twice a week, which my oldest son and I started taking, and then later my youngest son started taking. And so that's how I got into martial arts. And eventually we all three of us got our black belts in that. And then down the road we met up with Sifu Cowles, Joseph Cowles, who is the founder and creator of Wu Wei Kung Fu, and studied under Bruce Lee for a period of time, and was good friends with him as well. And very, very wonderful man. My oldest son and I got our black sash in Wu Wei Kung Fu through him. That's where I got into the martial arts, and then got permission from both our Taekwondo instructor, that by this point we were going into the next town over, because we quit taking from the other one, and started taking from a better guy in town. And once we got our black belts, we were able to get permission from him and also from our Wu Wei instructor to start teaching our own classes, which is what we did. And so then I did that for 8 years maybe, that I taught that along with the dance classes. So my total time of teaching dance here, not counting the times I taught back in where I grew up, was 28 years here, and then 8 or 10 years of martial arts that I taught. And so that was really good. It was a way I could stay home and homeschool my kids and still have a business and earn some money on the side, which ended up being a real blessing because when I met Patrick, he had just got out of the Army. He was working at a local lumber mill. And things were, okay for a while, but then a lot of things happened that caused a lot of lumber mills to get either shut down or having to lay their employees off, and it was getting worse and worse. And so Patrick then was able to go to school during that time when I was pregnant with my second son. He went to school and got a couple of different degrees. Well, obviously not all of that while I was pregnant, but some of that time while he was going to school, I was pregnant with Justin and still teaching dance, and mostly ballet. We did do a little bit of tap and some other types of dance, but my main focus was on ballet, and we did lots of big shows and stuff. Then he went on to get a career with first the public utility district. He got into water treatment, and that became his main career. So he's worked for the public utilities. He's worked out of Seattle for a more private-owned business treating water for half the city of Seattle, and then he came back out here, and during that time was rough because he had to pretty much live over in Duval, which is a 4-hour drive away, and I had 2 teenage sons, so felt like I was raising them by myself, but it was kind of necessary at that time. Then he was able to get back here and treat water back in our area again until he retired. Recently he retired, which has been really great to get out of that. And we did do a video on escaping the rat race where we talk a little bit about that and how we're now earning an income. And it's great. We're totally home-based business, and we do it all from here. And because of what we do, this whole virus shutdown thing has not affected us any in that way. We were able to continue on and keep working and keep earning an income. So anyway, with all that, now how did we get into what we're doing now? Well, I started eventually while I was homeschooling my kids. I still had that, still trying to live a more old-fashioned life and still always learning all through that time how to do things for myself, because that's my independent nature. I want to learn how to do it myself. I want to come up with my own recipes. Yes, I might use a base recipe to generally get an idea of how to make something, but after that I would develop my own. I was very much that way all along. After Patrick went from working for the public utility district, it was right about that same time as 2008, he did for about a year his own business, contracting business, because he already had his dump truck and backhoe by that point that he had saved up for, bought all this stuff used, and so glad that we had that. His plan was to have it for if we ever got a piece of property, because we had been shopping for property, a bigger piece of property, for years and years. This had been going on for a long time, long before we even got serious about gardening and having chickens and any of that. But I knew if we ever had a bigger place, I wanted chickens. So his whole idea of getting the backhoe and the dump truck then was so that he could have something to do his own work on our property, maybe build our own house and all that. Anyway, that ended up becoming his business for a short period of time, was the contracting, until he got the job over in Seattle, which was a real blessing because, PUD was cutting back, everybody was cutting back in 2008. But that was what really, I believe that whole time was what really became the catalyst, because it was a scary time for us. And yet we never went without. We were always blessed, but we learned how to really cut back. It's such as drying the clothes on the clothesline. I always have tried to be more on the frugal side. I've been doing that since my kids were babies. And I asked Patrick to put clotheslines here in my living room, and we had a clothesline outside, and we've always used them. I think it was about 2010 that we got serious of kind of really looking into. I, at that point, decided I wanted to understand better what was going on in the world politically. We had another election that would be coming up in 2 years, and I didn't want to just keep voting for the lesser of two evils, quote unquote. I wanted to find out who these people really were. And so the first time in my life, I decided in 2010 to dig in and start learning about politics, who was running, what's the difference between Democrats and Republicans, if there is a difference. That is, you know, some people might really call me crazy here, but that was when I learned about Ron Paul, and I started following him, and he was the only one I found that ever made any sense whatsoever. And because of him, I feel like I learned so much more. And I realized even more so the importance of becoming autonomous, of becoming more self-sufficient. No one person is completely self-sufficient, and I understand that. But as self-sufficient as we can become as individuals, but also as a country, I realize how incredibly important that is. And I'm sure a lot of people right now are realizing even more so how important it is for our country to be more autonomous and independent, truly independent. And so anyway, I was starting to see that back then, and that's what got us into getting serious about, even though I'd been gardening off and on through the years. I've always kind of grown tomatoes and some dahlias and things like that, but tomatoes were the big thing because you can never get good tasting tomatoes at our local store. It's not the store's fault, it's just because this isn't tomato country. We decided to just really crack down. We got rid of the above ground swimming pool we had and turned that all into garden and refreshed our greenhouse that we had, and just started through the years finding more and more garden space. And then of course came the chickens. That was definitely a blessing. I don't want to ever have to go without having chickens personally, because there's so much good in having chickens. I think everybody, if you are able, even if it takes a little bit of civil disobedience, I think everybody should try to keep at least a couple of chickens, and everybody should try to have a garden. But that's my personal thoughts. I also believe in complete freedom, and that nobody should force anybody to do anything. For example, you know, someone who really started understanding, a young lady, the importance of having a garden, said on a Facebook post, this was a couple years ago, that it should be a law that everybody has a garden. And it's like, well, while I believe it's a great idea for everybody to have a garden, it should not be a law. We should never, ever make laws that force people to do something they don't want to do. And that goes for vaccines, that goes for buying insurance, that goes for anything. And I equally, even though I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do marijuana, I also don't think these things should be illegal. I think that takes away people's freedom of choice. People should have the right to choose whether they want to smoke marijuana or drink. It's their right. These things should not be made illegal, so I don't agree with that. And that's why I voted yes to have marijuana, cannabis, be legal in Washington State, because even though I don't smoke it and don't believe any Christians should allow themselves to be influenced by any kind of drug, I think people should have the right to use it if they so choose, and especially if they're going to be responsible. So that's me. That's where I stand. I believe in true liberty, but that also includes liberty of the unborn. So a woman's right to choose whether or not she wants to kill her unborn child is not right, because now they've taken that child's right to life away, and that's murder. So, you know, a lot of you may hate me for that, and that's fine. That is one thing I definitely will stand very strongly on. And yes, we do have that little piece of property down the road. Still not a lot we can do on it yet, but we do plan on expanding to some degree there. And we are still property hunting, you know, where we can at least have another place. But for now, we're also making the most of where we're at on our little shy 1/3 acre lot here in the neighborhood. And the one benefit I can see of us doing this here and being public and like having our garden out front is people are noticing, people are taking note. And I'm noticing that more people are getting into gardening as well. And just like the neighbor behind us, he has always had his whole yard is a garden, and we've learned a lot from him, and in turn I've been able to teach others, and, you know, even share some of our abundance with our neighbors. And I think that's a good thing. I think that helps them see the importance of being able to grow your own food, especially at a time like now. And even if they choose not to, that's still their right to choose. But as long as I can be some kind of good example to other people, I think that's the one thing that makes it good about doing what we're doing right here in our neighborhood. The kids running around out here that, you know, play on nice days like today, they see me out there working in the garden. Like I was out there yesterday gathering some peppermint for tea, and a neighbor girl was riding her bike by, and she saw the chickens were out there with me. She goes, "You feeding your chickens?" Because I was holding a basket. And I said, "No, I'm just gathering some peppermint for tea." And she's really interested in gardening, this young girl, and I think it is so cool. And even right where we're at, even though we may not have 40 acres of property and a whole acre worth of garden, doing what we're doing here with the chickens, with the garden, and people being able to see that, and our family coming over and seeing that, people are learning and they're getting an idea. And even if they never jump on board, at least I think it's helping them to understand why we're doing what we're doing. And I can see that God has really been using me in that way. And all through my life, through the time of teaching dance, I had a ministry there too, of reaching to young girls and teaching them, because unlike most ballet teachers, I didn't tell the girls they had to be a specific, perfect anorexic body type. I was very much about teaching them how to be the best person they could be in the skin that God gave them. That was an important thing to me, because I understood what it was like to feel beat down and worthless, and I wouldn't put up with that. So that was my ministry to the girls. So even though I got to give them a gift of teaching them how to be coordinated in that gift of dance, even if they never went on to make a profession out of it, it gave them coordination so they could move on to do other things like sports that they got to be really good at, or it just gave them a self-confidence they otherwise might not have had. And I had many parents tell me that if it wasn't for you in your classes, my daughter, she was so shy and so scared. And there's something I forgot to tell you. I was incredibly shy as a young girl. In fact, I didn't even talk to my mom for the first few years of my life, because I was too shy to talk around any adult. I love my mom, but I wouldn't even talk to her. She thought I was actually mute until she came in the bedroom one day and caught me fighting with my brothers, and she found out I had all kinds of words. But and then growing up, I mean, a lot of people through school didn't really know me because I was so shy. And in fact, I found out in high school, I think it was my junior or senior year in high school, that a lot of people assumed I was a snob because I never talked to anyone. It's like, seriously? No, I'm just scared of everyone. I'm shy. You know, I was so insecure in who I was. Anyway, just so you understand where I'm coming from and what sort of brought me here to where I'm at now. And I thank God I'm in the position I am now. I want to throw in one more thing. A few years ago, when Patrick was still working at his last job, I knew in my gut that there was a big change coming. I just didn't know what it was. And I retired from teaching dance, and then eventually retired from the martial arts to focus more on what I was doing here and to start my YouTube channel, not believing I'd ever make any money off YouTube or ever go anywhere. I never even dreamed I could get as many as 10,000 subscribers, let alone 60,000 subscribers, where I'm almost at the time I'm shooting this video. So it's surprised me that we've done what we've done, but it's just been a superb blessing. And again, I want to thank all of you, whether you're longtime followers or new time followers, those who've supported us through our Amazon links and through our Etsy store. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. It has just affirmed in us that we're where God wants us to be right now, and has made it possible for us to continue doing what we're doing right here on our little 1/3 acre and our shy 1 acre down the road there, and hopefully maybe another piece of property somewhere else, if God willing. We'll see what happens. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this very long craft time chat and got to learn just a little bit more about me. And please don't be afraid to go ahead and share your stories down below of what took you from the position you were in to where you are now, if you're into homesteading and all that, or if you're in the process of change. What changed your mind? What made you see things in a different way, that made you realize the importance of kind of doing away with certain other things that you used to really like and focusing your attention more on being self-sufficient? Okay, well, thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.